Welcome in for another episode of the Silver and Blue Podcast. I'm your host, Nate Sanchez. Joining me is my co-host, Corey Douglas. Corey, it is Tuesday afternoon. We weren't able to record on Monday immediately afterward. So we're now a couple days removed from the Cowboys playoff loss. And I gotta say, man, this one was really frustrating. I feel like it was such a winnable game that they had, and they let one get away, and the NFC Championship drought continues. It's just frustrating, man. Very very frustrating day.
Yeah, to me, what that game came down to is just any play that the Cowboys were or had an opportunity to make to win that game, they just didn't make. When you talk about the Deron Bland interception very early in the game, you talk about Dalton Schultz, the one catch after the CD Lamb big play, not taking advantage of the fumble recovery that you get, not being able to take advantage of the George Kittle bobbling the ball where Trevon Diggs just completely whiffs on him there. That was an opportunity to separate Kittle and the ball. Uh, just
The Diggs
turnovers on
drop
top of
pick.
that.
The
Yeah,
Diggs
Diggs
drop
drop
pick.
pick.
And didn't they score
Um,
immediately after that? Like that's a big play.
Yeah, and that whole
It
drive was a
mattered.
mess. I mean, you talk about penalties that kind of walked them down the field the entire drive, and that was the only touchdown drive that they had. You take away, like Michael Parsons said, take away the 6 points that you gave up off the interceptions, and you're looking at a completely different ball game. But like I said, it all came down to the Cowboys definitely had opportunities to make plays to win this game, and they just weren't able to make them.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you hit it spot on. Excuse me. But yeah, I feel like the let's talk about Dak first, because the Dallas defense gave you an outstanding performance. Yeah, they showed some cracks at the end. They were down a bit at the end, and I think some of that might have had to do with one team was playing on two extra. One team was playing on a short week, and the other team had 2 more days of rest. That's another conversation for another day. I think the Monday night playoff game needs to go like that. That's another conversation for another day. But
Yeah.
um, and again, I don't mean that as an excuse. I just think that having a Monday night playoff game when you're on a short week compared to everyone else is a little bogus. But um, anyways, let's talk about Dak first, and then we'll talk about the defense, who deserves a lot of credit for their performance on Sunday. Um,
Hmm.
Dak just wasn't good. He was not good. And Dallas wins that game with probably an average Dak game, even a slightly below average Dak game. And Dak, that wasn't one of the worst games of his career, but that was maybe the worst playoff game of his career. He just didn't play well, missed throws. He was antsy all day. He's just not a good performance, and it's kind of fitting given how interesting his performances this year have been, just from a standpoint of how up and down he was. I'd say overall he was really good this year. I think he had a really good year, but every now and then he'd have these weird moments. And his two playoff performances this year kind of are a microcosm of the entire season. He went from the best game of arguably best game of his career against Tampa Bay to whatever that was on Sunday. So just a little bit of a fitting cap to a frustrating season for Dak. And again, I think he was really good this year overall. If you look deeper at the numbers, he was a very good quarterback this year, despite what ESPN and whoever else wants to tell you. Um, but yeah, Sunday was just this playoff 2 game stretch for Dak felt a little bit like a microcosm of just everything this year.
Yeah, and it's kind of hard at this point to kind of keep in perspective with Dak's performance because it was, like you said, it wasn't good. It was something that kind of fed into narratives of,
Mhm.
can Dak Prescott lead a team to a Super Bowl, or how much help do you need around Dak to actually win a Super Bowl? Like I've seen a lot of conversation about well, you don't have the offensive line, but then, obviously he was a young quarterback back then and he had the offensive line back then. Well, he doesn't have enough playmakers. Well, last year you had three number one receivers that you were hyping up all season long. And we'll get to Michael Gallup, because that's a whole different conversation for this year. He was not good. but it's just one of those things where I mean, I already had, some reservations about kind of, is Dak capable of leading a team, depending on the type of team around him. Is he capable of elevating a team, I guess you can say, is the questions I had. And once again, we saw, against, albeit, number one defense on the road, short week, coming off the best game of his career. I get all of that, but I think this performance definitely, I think, raised, even more eyebrows, from my perspective. And it's something that obviously the Cowboys can't do anything about it right now. He's going to be the quarterback for at least probably 1 and probably 2 more years. But I do think we might have to go kind of like the Kansas City Chiefs Alex Smith route, in a couple years, if Dak, can't show up in these big games more consistently.
Yeah. So as a noted staunch Dak defender, and I'm not gonna the flag behind me. I'm not gonna hide it. Um, Look, he's not an elite quarterback, and we knew this. He's not, and there's about two-ish, maybe three quarterbacks that are capable of just masking flaws and carrying a team. And that's like the Mahomes, the Burrow, but even Burrow has unbelievable weapons uh and a really good defense. And like it's like borderline just Mahomes, and then you get into like Burrow and Allen, who, by the way, side note, Josh Allen was
Yeah,
also
Josh Allen's
awful
not
on
that dude
Sunday.
either. Yeah, he's
He
not
was
that
also
dude either.
awful on Sunday, and all I'm seeing on ESPN is Dak getting dragged through the mud, but no one's talking about Josh Allen. But anyways, that's my Dak fandom creeping in there. But it is irritating how different the narrative surrounding Dak and Josh Allen is this week, because Josh Allen was also terrible on Sunday. But
He had two bad
anyways,
playoff games, by the way.
yeah, exactly. So it's just it is what it is. I guess it has less to do with Dak and Josh Allen and more to do with the logo that's on their helmets. So I get it, I guess, but still
Yeah,
frustrating nonetheless. But back to my point, you know, you're telling on yourself if you say Dak is anything in the elite territory, and you're telling on yourself if you think he's anything outside of a top 8 or 9 quarterback. And so what good front offices do is, they say, all right, we have this quarterback, and look no further than the two teams in the NFC Championship game. They looked at their quarterback, and mind you, Brock Purdy, Jimmy Garoppolo, Trey Lance, I guess that three-headed, the three quarterbacks the Niners had this year, and Jalen Hurts. None of them are on that. Neither of them are on that elite tier. Despite
mhm.
what Philly fans may kid themselves into thinking about Jalen Hurts, he's a really good quarterback, just like Dak. But the difference between the Eagles front office and the Dallas front office is the Eagles surrounded their quarterback with talent and said, "We're going to help you out. We're going to make sure you have a lot around you, and we're going to make your life easier and give you the best possible chance to succeed." What the Dallas front office did was they took away weapons, they subtracted weapons, they actively made the offensive line a little bit worse. And then that's another. We had those conversations all last offseason. So again, I don't think this playoff run or anything about what happened this year changes anything about the narrative around Dak. He's still a really good quarterback that you can win with, but you can't win because of. And there's about two or three, maybe four quarterbacks that are in that you win because of category. Everybody else in that next tier, that's the tier Dak's in. Those are quarterbacks that you can win with, but you have to be smart and build around them. And frankly, in the end, again, I know Dak wasn't good on Sunday, but in the end, uh, the weapons and what Dak was provided with were not enough, because Dak can't elevate that. Dak can't carry that all the way to the promised land. You have to give him some help. So I'm excited for these offseason conversations we're going to have, but I really just don't think anything about what happened in these playoffs in this season changes, what to do about Dak, because he is who he is. He's 30 years old. He's not going to make some big leap at this point. He is who he is. He's a very solid, good quarterback, not elite, that you can win with, but not because of. And
Yeah, I
that's that,
think
that, that that's my Dak rant. That's my Dak rant.
Yeah, and I think I saw an interesting stat the other day. I believe it was Sunday after the game, where oddly enough, like the mayor of Dallas, I think it was, responded to a tweet where it was from RJ Choppy, and he said that two things I learned about this game: Dak ain't it, and the 49ers ain't it either. And it was funny because the mayor of Dallas or whoever it was responded to him, and it was like, Dak's going to have to make some history if he wants to take this team to the promised land, because I believe it was like three or four quarterbacks in NFL history have taken a team to the Super Bowl for the first time after being with the organization for like 7 years.
Yeah.
And obviously, Dak just finished. I believe it was the seventh year he just finished.
Yeah, this is year 7.
Yeah, 7. So in that regard, Dak's gonna have to make some history. But also, one thing I hope the Cowboys do change this offseason is, number one, let's just go ahead and can Kellen Moore. I think that's actually coming here in the next couple of weeks. I think he's gonna be gone
I
and
think
get
he
a
might be a
new
head coach somewhere. Like, he might be a head coach.
yeah, either way, I think he's going to be gone, whether he gets a head coaching job or not. Like, I think, the Cowboys, Jerry Jones and Stephen Jones, they've been canceling, press conferences and media obligations all week long. And typically when that happens, it means that they're up to something. And I think changes on the coaching staff are coming. So that's number one. That's one thing I want them to do this offseason, and just kind of get rid of the narrative of, okay, well, it's Kellen Moore's fault, type of thing. Second thing I want the front office to do is kind of what you just said. It was about building a roster around him and stop acting like Dak Prescott is one of those 2 to 3 quarterbacks that can elevate lesser talent around him. He's not that quarterback. Like you said, Kansas City, they got rid of Tyreek Hill. What does Mahomes do? He goes on to have another MVP type season because he is one
He's
of
one of
one.
one.
I mean, I,
He's one of
I
one.
think he's one of one, and I think Burrow and Allen and whoever else you want to throw in that conversation, I think just mark a line, put Mahomes number one, and draw a couple spaces, and then every other quarterback in the league can go, somewhere below that. So I think that's very important for this front office to kind of take a dose of reality, and stop acting as if Dak Prescott is that on that elite tier, because he's not, and he's proven time and time again that he's not. So let's build the
Mhm.
roster around him, offensive line. Let's get that shirt up. Let's get some weapons outside of CD Lamb. Dalton Schultz, I hope he enjoyed his last game, because I have a lot to say about Dalton Schultz, and I'm not happy with him right now. But I hope he enjoyed his last game as a Dallas Cowboy, because he's not going to be back. And we've kind of talked about this all season. But that's kind of where I'm at, as far as the Dak Prescott conversation goes.
Yeah, it's just, and we said it at the time. That's the thing. Like we said it all off season. We were like, the front office they were very unserious last off season, and we said it all along. We said, all the issues that we talked about kind of came to a head in this game. And I know we're having a general Dak conversation. We'll get into the 49ers game a little bit more detailed here in a minute, but um, there weren't enough weapons. They cut Amari Cooper, or released him or traded him for a 5th-round pick, and they put that money towards Dalton Schultz, who had a nice season, but he's not a game-changing tight end. He's not a tight end that you give big money to. Um, and so they used Amari's money on Schultz and Michael Gallup, who, man, I hope he comes back right next year. I hope he does. But Dallas is locked into Gallup for $13 million next year. And I know he was coming off an ACL, but man, they better hope Gallup takes a leap injury wise, because he just made no impact outside of the occasional decent game he'd have. I saw someone say he had more 0-yard receiving games than he did 50-yard receiving games. Just
And there's
it
also
wasn't it. And those like the weapons given. I mean, and it's kind of a microcosm when you look at the San Francisco box score. You see CeeDee Lamb 10 for 117. And then you just see a bunch of smaller numbers, T.Y. Hilton,
two,
Noah Brown,
one,
Michael Gallup.
zero.
Yeah. So the receiving box score from Sunday is kind of a microcosm of everything we said the front office was doing wrong going into this season. And I think I saw one more thing. I saw someone say on Twitter that It was God, I don't know his like actual name, but I know his account's called Wedge Buster. I think you might follow him too. But I saw he said feels like this front office, and we said all along the front office was kind of punting on this year and getting ready to build up for next year. And then the team kind of surprised them and went 12-5 when we all in the front office thought this was going to be a 9 or 10 win team. Um, and it's just kind of how this all played out. Like it was like an unserious off season that it felt like they were not completely punting on this season, but more gearing up for 2023 in my opinion. And I don't hate that take because a lot of their offseason moves kind of reflect that.
Yeah, one really awful stat, and I'm trying to find it right now, but it was along the lines of his catch percentage among all receivers going, I think, either since he came into the league or the last 2 or 3 seasons that he's been healthy, and he
I
like
think I
ranks
saw that.
near the bottom
Yeah.
out of like every qualifying receiver in the league, which is just absolutely awful. And that the fact that this team prioritized Michael Gallup and Schultz over Amari Cooper for all the flaws that Amari Cooper came with, it's a bad roster building move. And now you're locked into this guy for $13 million, like you said, number two money, and now you're still on the search for another number two receiver at this point. And I think those Odell Beckham conversations are going to have to be revisited. Although he's going to be another year older, and a year removed from out the league really. So it's going to be interesting to see how they address that and
Yeah.
go forward. But having that 13 million on the books is just not going to be great.
Yeah, not ideal. And I just think the biggest thing, let's get into the 49ers game, but my last point is as we go into the offseason, as you and I talk about, what we want to see the front office do. The biggest thing this offense needs is speed. And we saw in the game when Tony Pollard went out, they just there was no juice left in the offense besides CeeDee Lamb, and San Francisco wasn't scared of anybody else. So
Mm-mm.
we'll get into that and potential moves in the coming days and weeks, but yeah, offensively, Dallas didn't run the ball great. I will say this: I was pretty impressed with the offensive line. I want to say per PFF, they only surrendered, I want to say 8 or 9 pressures, and I think a few of them those came on the last couple drives when San Francisco knew Dallas was only going to be passing. Um, I was really impressed with Tyler Smith. I thought he had a really good game. And hell, I mean, maybe the Tyron Smith decision will be an interesting one in the offseason because I thought he's looked more and more comfortable at right tackle. And with Terrence Steele coming back from an ACL, he probably won't be ready for the start of the year. The Tyron Smith conversation in the offseason will be interesting, but I was pretty pleased with the offensive line on Sunday. I mean, they were always going to have a tough time running the ball, especially without Pollard. But the way they protected, I was impressed with. And if you would have told me that San Francisco only had 9 pressures, I would have said Dallas probably won the game going away. I thought the offensive line did their part, especially in pass protection.
Yeah, and I think that brings up an interesting conversation because, like you said, Tyler Smith, outside the two early penalties that he had, I thought he, like you said, played a fantastic game. You didn't hear his name at all. I thought Tyler Biotish got more and more comfortable as the season went on. The Tyron Smith conversation is going to be interesting. We'll see how quickly Steele can recover, because I think there's that dream offensive line that we were hoping to have for the majority of the season. I do think that's a possibility at some point next
Mm-hmm.
year if
Yeah.
Terrence Steele can come back healthy, get Tyron Smith coming back, slide Tyler Smith into left guard just for the time being, because I believe it was Stephen Jones or Will McClay said recently in the last couple of weeks that you think you found your future left tackle in Tyler Smith. So just having that versatility, getting him in that experience throughout the entire year, due to some, not ideal circumstances, was, definitely a great thing for him. And, he got kind of thrown into the fire. He had a great season against a great playoff run against two really good defensive lines. And I mean, I don't think you could ask for more than what he provided you this year.
Yeah, that's the last thing I'll say on the offensive line is cheers to Tyler Smith. I was a guy who was not pumped at all about the pick. I viewed him as very much a day two guy, and he was one of, if not, I mean, I'm probably forgetting somebody, but he was one of, if not the best rookie offensive tackle this year. Really encouraging stuff, and Dallas has their left tackle of the future. And I can feel comfortable in that and knowing that we have Tyler Smith going forward. So
Hmm.
that's two straight first round picks that they've hit on, and they're going to need to hit on another one this year. So cheers to that. But yeah, we talked about the receivers as well a little bit in our DAC conversation. It just wasn't good enough. There just was no team speed. No one, and we knew this going in, but San Francisco was scared of nobody besides CeeDee Lamb, and that kind of showed in the second half. And honestly, that, not to bring this back to the DAC conversation, but I think part of these issues are, uh, you know, uh, defenses are not scared of these other guys, and those guys aren't getting any separation, and CD's getting way more attention, and that results in these tighter window throws that leads to deflections, which leads to interceptions. Um, I just think next year there has to be more speed in that receiver room. There simply has to be. And I think the offensive scheme needs a change in terms of there's just offensively, it just feels like there's never the layups that you see from other offenses. Guys just running wide open, mesh concepts that where someone gets free. It just feels like
It's a bunch of
L
comebacks and go
as
routes.
goo yes, as good as the Dallas passing as good as Dallas offense was in terms of scoring, um, it's higher risk because Dak has to throw in these tighter windows, so, I think the offensive scheme needs to be looked at hard in the offseason, and I think the personnel needs to get much faster, and so it is what it is, but, one
I
more
think
thing. Go ahead.
just real quick, yeah, just on that, I think that's why we need to get Kellen Moore out of here, one way or the other. Like I talked about earlier, I think it's going to happen, but I mean, I definitely think it needs to happen. Like that's gonna, if you had an off-season to-do list, getting rid of Kellen Moore is definitely at the top of that list. And I think, kind of similar to the way they brought in Dan Quinn a couple years ago, I think they need to go outside the organization. The rumblings that I've heard for them replacing Kellen Moore with Schottenheimer or someone along those lines. I don't think that is the fix for the offense and getting the creativity and different things like that. I
Mhm.
think you need to go outside the organization and bring in one of those creative minds that's out there. And I think that number one will definitely help that because I think if you look at that first interception, it was a comeback. Michael Gallup quit on the route, but it was also just we run nothing but comebacks and go routes. A
Yeah,
good defense and good corners
hitches, yeah.
is are going to and hitches. I mean, they're going to make adjustments for that. And I know Dak Prescott kind of hinted on it after the game where it was just like maybe we just ran that one too many times, and a guy that was a weakness coming into the game was able to make a play on that. So
Yeah,
I definitely think switching up the scheme is definitely like a must have this offseason.
yeah, yeah, and I think the philosophy needs to be looked at for sure. Um, I will say I'm not as anti Kellen Moore as you or most people are. I'm very much of the belief that he runs the offense that he's told to in the front office, and ownership is kind of neutered. Whatever they bring in, whatever play caller does what they say. But anyway, let's talk about that next time. I do want to mention Tony Pollard, and I know we're a little shorter on time, so let's get into the defense as well. But I thought the Tony Pollard injury was a pretty big gut punch to this team. The fact that they were driving 6-6 late in the first half, and then I believe back-to-back plays, Pollard breaks his fibula and high ankle sprain, and then Dak throws that second pick. Just can't happen. And honestly, as a fan at that point in the game, I was starting to feel pretty confident that we were driving tie game. We're either going to be up
Before
3.
halftime, get the ball
Yeah,
after halftime.
they're
Like
either going to be up a field goal or a touchdown going into halftime. Um, and you're getting the ball coming out in the second half. And I just think the Pollard injury and that interception were just massive gut punches to this team. And then the defense turns around and lets San Francisco get into field goal range. And you go from driving
Yeah.
to take a 3 or 7 point lead, or 6 if Brett Maher missed an extra point. Um, you go from that to down 9-6. That was just a massive gut punch and a massive turning point in the game for me. But Pollard, as we know now, fractured fibula, high ankle sprain, really sucks for him going into free agency. It's about a 3 or 4 month recovery. I really hope he's still able to get paid, be it by Dallas or somebody else, just because he's an awesome player and deserves his money. And it kind of goes back to the
He'll
team
be back.
speed
He'll be
discussion.
back in Dallas.
I think he will too, but it just goes back to the team speed discussion that once Pollard went out, there was really nobody besides CD that San Francisco was
One
scared of.
playmaker.
So that was kind of that offensively for Dallas. Just a lot of missed opportunities and a really winnable game. And this game was winnable because the Dallas defense came to play. Dan Quinn had a fantastic game plan, and above all of that, the defensive line came to play. Micah Parsons was outstanding.
Mm-hmm.
I think he finished 8 or 9 pressures. DeMarcus Lawrence, we talked about him going in. He was on the
Yep.
short list of guys that had a
Yep.
really rough night against Tampa Bay. DeMarcus Lawrence was outstanding on Sunday, making plays all over the place, especially in the run game. They really just kind of bottled up. They bottled up McCaffrey for the most part, and they
Bottled up
uh,
Debo.
bottled up Debo. Kittle got loose a couple times, but like that's going to happen when you have that many playmakers. I thought the Dallas defense did about as much as you could ask for them. And the biggest thing you and I said going in was make Brock Purdy uncomfortable. He has not been pressured like much at all. He's a rookie 7th rounder. Make his life uncomfortable. Credit to Purdy. He never made like the devastating mistake. Granted, there was a dropped interception or two. But, there was no interceptions in the box score, so no one's going to talk about that. But they made him uncomfortable. They weren't able to get the big mistake from San Francisco, but they held him to 19 points. And I think if you told me about that Dallas defensive performance going in, I would have said Dallas won this game going away as well, which it makes it a little bit more frustrating, the fact that it was such a winnable game in terms of how the Dallas defense played. And what that would have meant for them, meant for the offense, just in terms of, hey, look, the defense is playing great, and they're really slowing down this awesome San Francisco offense.
Yeah, I think when you go into this game and you think, because I think I had the score like 29-22, that's almost 30 points for, a good offense, which is, normal. So you hold that team to 19 points and, one touchdown. The one touchdown drive was, well into the second half. I mean, that is definitely a game that you should win. Purdy, we were putting pressure on him. It was really
Yeah.
simple as that. He was running for his life a lot. But like you said, he just didn't make that crucial mistake, didn't turn the ball over at all. And they were able to make just enough plays, get into some short and, 3rd and short situations, get some quick passes to McCaffrey, but, never gave up the explosive play. We had a couple, really great dropped opportunities to kind of take advantage of, and we did not. And it kind of just goes back to that conversation at the top of the show where it was just this team had multiple opportunities in this game and they just could not take advantage of them. And that includes the defense. But, you can't be mad at this defense for the performance that they rolled out there, all things considered. So definitely tough pill to swallow because this was, the best defense that this team has had in years. They kind of flipped the switch back to kind of how they were earlier in the season where they weren't giving up much at all. Like you mentioned, Kittle got loose for a couple, and it was just, I think the big play on that drive that they scored the touchdown on, it was an opportunity for, I think Trevon Diggs had a great opportunity to, kind of just touch Kittle at that point, and I don't think he makes that catch, but he completely whiffs, and that was arguably the biggest play of the game.
Yeah, there was just towards the end, they just seemed to wear down a little bit. Just especially in the run game. One injury that was really under the radar that, wasn't talked about at the time, was Carlos Watkins going out. He'd been playing really good
He was
football
playing
for Dallas
well.
at the defensive tackle. Him and Osa were playing really well. Osa had a great game as well.
Yep.
But Watkins going out forced them to dig a little deeper, and that created more Neville Gallimore snaps, who is just not good against the run. He just gets bullied on double teams, and
And then he got
it
caught on
really
Kittle on
showed
that
on
big
that.
play.
It really, yes, and just once Watkins went out, the cracks started showing a little bit in the run game, but yeah, I feel pretty good about the corners in this game as well. They played about as well as you could have asked. I really don't have a lot to complain about as far as the defensive performance. The defensive line was outstanding, and credit to Dan Quinn and what is probably going to end up being his last game coaching in Dallas, just because I think he's going to be a
Yeah,
head coach
teams are
somewhere
after
else next
him.
year. Yeah,
Hmm.
he has a whole lineup of interviews set up this week. So, yeah, I have no complaints about the defense. And one more play I do want to mention, a positive play. I am still just marveling and am in awe about that Micah Parsons pass rush
Yep.
move on Mike McGlinchey, breaking out the old school
Slung him.
Reggie White, the Reggie White, the hump move where I looked it up. Mike McGlinchey is listed at like 295 pounds, and Micah had him parallel to the ground off his feet.
Yep.
Like, that
Yep.
was credit to Micah Parsons. And we said at the beginning of the playoffs, Dallas is going to go as far as their two MVPs can take them, Dak and Micah. Micah held up his end of the deal. He was outstanding against Tampa Bay, and he was outstanding against San Francisco. So credit to Micah. I believe he played every single snap on Sunday. Micah deserves his flowers as we put a bow on the 2022 season.
Yeah, I mean, those are, looking forward when you look at this team and some of the young talent that they have. I mean, Michael Parsons at the top of the list. Is going to get paid here soon. Trevon Diggs,
He's
all
gonna
his
get paid.
flaws, he's going to get paid. And then you look on offense, you got CD, and I think Pollard's going to be back. So, I mean, the building blocks are there. Now it's up to this front office to go out there and continue to add talent, continue to kind of fix
Mhm.
some things on the offensive line, get some depth at corner, and just continue to try to build and kind of do what they've been doing all along, but just be a little more aggressive with certain, maybe a move or two in free agency gets you over the top in that type of game. And just making sure you have more playmakers on offense, because that ultimately was the difference when you have McCaffrey,
Mhm.
Debo, and then you keep those under wraps, and then Kittle explodes. You take
Yep.
away CD Lamb or take away Pollard, like he got hurt in this game. It's CD Lamb and nobody else. T.Y.
Yeah.
Hilton, as great as I felt like he played towards the end of the regular season. In the playoffs, it was pretty much non-existent. He has a really early catch against San Francisco, and then it's not seen again for the rest of the game. So yeah, just lack of playmakers on offense. Oddly enough for this team, it kind of ended up biting them. And then of course, the quarterback play not being up to what it needed to be. Definitely hurt.
Yeah.
And sometimes in these type of games, you just can't make that crucial mistake. And unfortunately, Dak Prescott and the Cowboys made one too many. And now the season's over and it's down to the final four in the NFL. So it's going to be interesting off season. I'm looking forward to kind of going through everything here.
Mhm.
And yeah, we'll see. We'll kind of see what happens and gear up for next year.
Yeah, there will be a lot of interesting conversations this offseason. And the last thing I'll say, and then we'll get out of here, is as much as Sunday sucked, I was really sad on Sunday, Sunday evening. It was my roommates were kind of like watching me with bated breath, making sure I was okay. But as much as Sunday sucked, when you look at it from a bird's eye view, you have your full arsenal of picks. The salary cap situation isn't ideal, but I mean, you can work around the salary cap. Um, this was one of the youngest rosters in the league. I want to say the second or third youngest by age in the league. I could be wrong. I know it's one of the youngest. I want to say it's second
Yeah,
or third.
it was
Um,
definitely the youngest in the playoffs by
by
like
far
6 or
the
7
youngest in
months,
the
I believe.
playoffs. As much
Mhm.
as everyone talks about Dak and Zeke having been around for a while, and Zach Martin and whoever, this is a really young roster that's going to be good for a while. You have a lot of good players under contract next year. Um, there was a lot to be encouraged about this year. This team was better than we thought they were going to be, and frankly, I would have signed up for this entire experience after week one when we knew Dak was hurt. Dak missed 5 games. They still went 12-5. They won a playoff game. That's a lower bar than it should be in Dallas. And they're going to be
Yeah.
raising that bar in the future, hopefully. But there's a really good young core of players here, and now it's up to this front office, which I'm not sure how much faith I have in that, but it's up to that front office to maximize this young talent and continue to build on it, because again, this is a really young roster with a lot of young talent on it that has a chance to be good for the next few years. They have their work cut out for them with what appears to be building in New York and obviously Philadelphia. So
Mhm.
um, it'll be an interesting offseason. I'm looking forward to talking about it with you. But yeah, unless you got anything else to say before we get out of here. Uh, Thank you guys for
Um,
listening this season and all along. We started this back in March, and it's been a lot of fun doing this with you all year, Corey. So again,
Absolutely.
thank you guys for listening. We'll talk to you guys next time on the Silver and Blue podcast, and be sure to follow us on all the socials down low, at Cowboys News 365, at Dallas_fanatic, and at Dallas Cowboys Fanatic on Instagram. You can get Corey on Twitter at the Mr. Douglas. You can get me on Twitter at Nate_Sanch77. And with that, we put a bow on the 2022-23 Dallas Cowboys. Looking forward to talking off season with you over the next few months,
Yes, sir.
listeners, and with you, Corey. So thank you guys for listening. We'll talk to you next time on the Silver and Blue podcast.